Jerry Kilroy answered the phone. "Hello? Jerry, it's me." It was Kelly, Jerry's older sister. Her voice was tense. "Hello, Kelly. What's the matter?" "Dad." He felt worse. "I should have called you." Jerry winced. His father had just turned 68 when he had a heart attack 3 months ago. He had a successful triple bypass surgery, stayed in the hospital for a week, and then was discharged when his condition stabilized. "What's happened?" Jerry asked. "He was fine when I was with you." "I know, but..." He became depressed. "The doctor says he had a stroke." "Stroke? Damn it!" Jerry exclaimed. "But last week the doctor was sure that he was recovering well." "I thought he had recovered, and was now recovering at home." "He is at home. That is, of course, from Uncle Tony. The stroke is believed to have been minor, but with his poor health, even a minor stroke is serious." "Oh, yes. Thank God the worst didn't happen," he replied. He knew that after the operation, his parents moved in with their friends, the Blaylocks. In their marriage, his father was always the stronger partner. He was the rock that his emotionally fragile mother held on to. Jerry remembered from early childhood that his mother never handled stress well. So when her husband fell ill with a heart attack, it was no surprise that she turned to her old friend Agnes Blaylock and her husband Anthony. Although not blood relatives, they were always family friends. Jerry, Kelly, and his other sister Kathy considered the Blaylocks almost family. They all grew up calling them Uncle Tony and Aunt Agnes. "Not really. It's bad, Jerry. I've never seen him like this. Can't you go back? Dad really needs us now, and Mom, too." "I'm sure they are," he agreed. "Okay, let me straighten things out with Olivia. I'm not sure she'll be able to take time off from her job. Maybe I'll go back alone." "Fine. Hurry up if you can. Dad is not feeling very well." "How is Mom doing?" There was a pause before Kelly answered hesitantly. "She is all right." It sounded strange, Jerry thought. He expected her to explain further. Instead, there was another long pause before Kelly said in a serious tone, "I need to talk to you about something. It is very important." "Is it true? About what?" "I don't want to talk about this on the phone. I'll meet you when you arrive. Just write to me before your arrival. I need to talk to you alone first before I see Dad." "It sounds mysterious. Can't give me a hint? Just come quickly. When you arrive, I'll fill you in on the matter." "Fine. Then see you in a few days." "Thank you, Jerry. We will be very thankful. I can't wait to meet you." "Me too, Kelly. See you soon." Jerry hung up. Strange ending to the conversation. He couldn't think of anything to say that she couldn't say over the phone. He would have to find out later. Jerry knew that his father's health had not been very good lately. He never liked going to the gym and was not in the habit of exercising, although for many years he worked as a car mechanic. He was drafted into the Army straight out of high school and trained and worked on military vehicles while serving in the Vietnam War. Although Frank Kilroy did not see combat, he was always proud of his military service, but I never talked about it with anyone outside the family. Even among his family, he mentioned it only on rare occasions. If asked, he always answered that service was his duty and he was proud to have served. Jerry once asked if he had ever been tempted to evade the draft. He said this as a joke to tug at Dad's chain a little. A stern look and a firm answer. "Never! Never in this damn life!" the father answered, making it clear that this was not an option. Jerry never joked about this again. Jerry knew a little about his time in Vietnam. Frank was stationed away from the main combat areas, but apparently not far enough, because a couple of years later, he got into a firefight. He was seriously injured when the explosion sent shrapnel into his neck and legs. The neck injury cleared up, but the leg injury was complicated. Since then, he has been walking with a pronounced limp. Frank ended his 4 years of service in a hospital bed in Saigon before being sent back to the United States. A few years later, he met his wife, Edith. They got married and immediately had Kelly. 2 years later, Katie. They decided that 2 girls were enough. Edith started taking the pills, and they were a family of 4 for the next 10 years. It was a surprise for Edith to learn that she became pregnant again when she was already over 30. Next came their accidental child, Jerry, whom they loved as much as the other 2 children, even though it was a surprise. Returning home from work, Jerry told his wife Olivia about his father's deteriorating health. As expected, she had already used up all her vacation days during their last visit to his father. She couldn't afford to take any more of them, so Jerry took a few days off the next week, drove out of the house on Friday night after work, loaded up the car, and kissed his wife goodbye. It was a 4-hour drive to his hometown, but he was in a hurry and tried to get there faster. A few miles from his destination, he texted his sister. A message came in response. "Meet me at Casson's Diner. You know where, right?" Jerry wrote back, "Yes. 20 minutes." Kelly was already sitting in the booth, waiting, and waved to him. Her light brown hair and soft features reminded him of their mother, who was a natural blonde. Katie was into it too. She had blonde hair and fair skin. Jerry always felt like his father, even though he was taller and had darker hair. He was also more muscular than his father, had dark, almost black hair, and could grow a beard in a couple of weeks. Even after shaving in the morning, he had a distinct 5-hour stubble by the time he got home from work. Kelly jumped up from her seat, and they exchanged warm hugs and kisses. "Glad you came, Jerry." "Certainly. I want to help." Jerry noticed the worry on her face. Something serious was bothering her. They ordered coffee and each took a cake. When the waitress left, Kelly gave her little brother an appraising look and quickly looked down. "I don't know how to tell you about this," she said, staring at the table and biting her lip. "Just say it, Kelly. I know this bothers you." "Okay." She took a deep breath and let it out. "Jerry, there is something you don't know about our family. This concerns Uncle Tony." "Okay." "You remember that Mom and the Blaylocks have been friends since college?" "I know it." "Mom and Aunt Agnes lived in the same room. They studied at the same college and met Uncle Tony there." "I know that too. A couple of years after college, Mom met Dad at a party, and here we are." "And what?" "Well, from then on, they were all friends. Mom and Dad got married, and a few years later, Tony and Agnes got married too." "Yes, Mom was Agnes's bridesmaid." "Exactly. I don't know if you know this. Before you were born, Dad had to leave town for several months to attend mechanic school. He was new to the company, and the classes took place quite far from home. During his training, the company allowed him to come home only once and only for a couple of days. He used his veteran's benefit to pay for his tuition. During the time he was gone, Mom seemed to become depressed and a little crazy." "Are you crazy? What does it mean?" Kelly shook her head and said, "She did something stupid, Jerry. She had an affair with Tony." "What?" he shouted too loudly. The other customers looked at each other, so he tried to control his voice and spoke more quietly. "Mother? Did she have an affair? With Uncle Tony? What the heck?" "Yeah. Mom is definitely an idiot. Now I know it." Jerry sat back down in his seat and tried to recover from this unexpected news. Did his mother cheat on his father with Tony Blaylock? Incredible. "When did you find out?" he asked her. Kelly looked away, looking guilty. "I knew about this almost from the very beginning. How is this possible? I knew that she dated him when Dad was at school. She hired a nanny for us, and he picked her up from home. She said they were going out to dinner or a show. Dad and Tony were friends, and he was always at our house anyway. I just thought he was being friendly at the time, trying to cheer her up because Mom was so sad when Dad was gone. Didn't you find it strange that he would pick her up and take her to dinner? By the way, where was Agnes?" "I didn't think it was unusual at the time," Kelly said, sincerely trying to make him understand. Agnes was with him several times, so she was undoubtedly aware of what was happening. They came to the house to pick up their mother, and when they left, they laughed and chatted joyfully. It looked quite innocent. It also happened that he would come alone and do some small work that my mother needed. I thought it was just a friend helping her while Dad wasn't home. That's all I thought at the time, and my mother allowed me to think that way. I realized that she cheated on him only when I was in high school." "Did it take you that long?" "Sorry, Jerry. I should have told you something sooner. But probably then I was very gullible. Now I understand. Don't let it bother you, Kelly. You were still a child and didn't know everything. There was a pause before Jerry asked, I take it Katie knows too? She gave him a sad look. I can't have secrets from her. You see, sisters. Yes, I understand. Jerry's head was spinning from this news. He never expected anything like this. He watched his older sister shift in her seat, her eyes darting around as she took another breath. This was a bad sign. That's not all, is it? Yes, unfortunately, she answered sadly. It's very hard. I hate to tell you about this, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We already had too many secrets. She looked him straight in the face and stated categorically, Jerry, I'm not sure that Dad is your biological father. What? No fucking way. Is it true? Yes. Sorry. I think you may be Uncle Tony's biological son. Kelly's voice broke as she made her statement. Then she broke down and brought her hands to her face. She began to sob slightly as she looked at her dark-haired brother, who was amazed. Are you kidding? You must be joking. My God. A tear welled up in his eye, and he quickly brushed it away before she could see. No, but I would like to, she replied, sobbing. But I'm not sure. I hope I'm wrong. I was talking about this with my mom the other day. She said she didn't know for sure either. But he thinks that then she became pregnant by Tony. You showed up a little over 9 months after they had already started their affair, and your resemblance to Tony is too great to deny. Dad never talked about it, so I don't think he realized the possibility until... It took Kelly a moment to stop sobbing and speak. Until a few weeks ago, when Mom let the cat out of the bag. What a stupid bitch she is. He was still recovering from a heart attack when she told him about her infidelity. Since then, my dad has become depressed. Perhaps that's why he had a stroke, because he took the news so hard. Crap. Jerry exhaled with anger. I know he's crushed. Damn her. Why the hell did Mom need to open her big mouth after all this, especially when it was in such a fragile state? It might be a mix-up with the medications, Kelly said. We all think so. Mom has been taking antidepressants for a long time. You know what she's like, but recently she got a new doctor. I think she met him in the hospital when Dad was having surgery. New doctor? For what? Oh, I don't know. Mom has always been a hypochondriac. She hung around the hospital and no doubt met a lot of doctors there. She must have convinced one of them to take her on as a patient. I imagine she didn't tell him about all the medication she was taking at the time because he gave her a new prescription for nerves, and unfortunately, that medication conflicted with some of the ones she was already taking. This made her somewhat delusional, and she told the whole story to her father during their quarrel. Jerry sat stunned in his seat, his brain overheating as he tried to process all this new disturbing information. So he might not be my real father? Jerry sighed thoughtfully. No, he is your real father, Kelly exclaimed. Oh my God, Jerry, don't ever think otherwise, please. I know. Of course he's real, he answered embarrassedly. You're absolutely right, Kelly. He is my dad and I love him. Regardless of whether he is my bio dad or not, I know he loves me, he always has, and will always be my real father. Thank you, Kelly sobbed and reached across the table to take his hands. For several poignant moments, the brother and sister held hands and shared their grief. Kelly hated telling her brother the truth, but he should have known. After a few moments, Jerry said, shaking his head, What a mess it is going on here. Tony is an idiot for taking advantage of her, and Mom is an idiot. Poor Dad. I can only imagine how he feels about her betrayal. His family is everything to him. I can't believe my mom can be such an incredible fool. A secret she's kept for decades is suddenly revealed as Dad fights for his life. What is the likelihood of this? He didn't take it well. How are things now? Do the Blaylocks still have it? Yes, for now anyway. I can imagine how he doesn't like living under the same roof with his wife's ex-lover, but he is quite helpless, and his mother does not want to come home to take care of him. She said she was upset and needed Tony's help. Kelly added in a bitter tone. And of course, old Uncle Tony is very happy to help her. She swallowed to suppress her bitterness and continued, "But as you might expect, Dad hates him now. He made that clear to Tony. And he doesn't allow his mother to help him with anything, and neither does Agnes. And how does he cope? Very bad. Of course, he needs help. Without his mother, there was no one to help, so he was taken to the Blaylocks. Tony gave him a separate room in his house and hired a nurse to look after him. He has a physical therapist. Of course, Tony can afford it. Yes, this bastard is rich. We all know this. It's so sad, Jerry. I visit him regularly, but he doesn't want to talk to me or Katie. I think he found out that we knew everything, but we didn't tell him. Now he feels betrayed by his entire family. He is so depressed that I almost cry when I see him. I can imagine. Poor guy. What a cruel retribution for all his labors. He was a faithful husband and an excellent father all his life. Honest, hardworking, a great provider, and look how that turned out." The brother and sister sat staring at the table, deep in thought. After a while, Kelly looked across the table and met her brother's gaze. "I know this is a shock for you. I hated to tell you," she admitted, "but I love you, Jerry. We love everything. Don't think that this changes anything between us. Katie knows I'm talking to you, and she'll say the same thing. She couldn't be here now, but it will be tomorrow. By the way, she says hi to you. Thank you, Kelly. You will always be my sister no matter what, and so will Katie." Kelly signaled for the bill and asked, "Are you ready to visit Dad?" "Yes, I really need to see him and help him if I can. I hope he doesn't take this too hard. You know what he's like." "Yes, he always had a keen sense of justice. Everything is either right or wrong, no halftones. That's why he's in so much pain. He can't accept Mom's apology or her reasons for doing what she did. He's a broken man, Jerry. I don't think he's said 3 words to Mom since they found out, and he glares at Tony. I can't blame him even after all this time," he said. "Mom has known about her affair for several decades, but for Father it is a fresh wound in his heart. The love he thought his mother had for him is now forever tarnished." "Humph. Mom certainly doesn't think so," Kelly said sarcastically. "She acts like she just told him she crashed the car. Mom says her affair is a thing of the past and that she hasn't been with Tony for years. She doesn't understand why he takes it so hard. I told her that, because her affair was long in the past, it hurt Dad no less. This happened very recently for him, and he still feels the pain. He's still very upset." Jerry and Kelly rode separately. As they pulled into the long driveway, Jerry saw the familiar sight of the large Blaylock house. This is a 2-story mini-mansion with a huge landscaped yard, a swimming pool, and a round flower garden. Uncle Tony owned 3 car dealerships and several other businesses. His house was a symbol of wealth in this small community. Frank Kilroy and Anthony Blaylock became an unlikely pair of friends. Tony's business success, contrasting with Kilroy's modest financial position, made their friendship unlikely over the years. Of course, now that Jerry knew about Tony and his mother's affair, it made a lot more sense. Jerry and Kelly were greeted at the door by a gloomy Aunt Agnes. Kelly and Agnes hugged and kissed, then Jerry hugged the older woman. The hug was tight, and when they pulled away, it became awkward. She was still a beautiful woman, slim, beautifully dressed, with perfectly styled silver hair. "Thank you for coming, Jerry," Agnes told him sincerely. "I hope having you here will cheer up your dad." "I hope so, too." When they were shown into the living room, Uncle Tony appeared. He was taller, 6 feet height, and his thick figure was dressed in an expensive silk suit. On his feet were patent leather shoes made of expensive leather. Smiling confidently, the older man stepped forward, hugged Kelly, and shook Jerry's hand. Jerry noticed his combed-back black hair, speckled with gray. This gave him a respectable appearance. "It's good to see you again, Jerry," Tony said with a smile. "I wish the circumstances had turned out better. But I'm very glad you're here." "Me too, Tony." Jerry wanted to call him Uncle Tony, but restrained himself. "Neither of you want a drink?" "No, thanks," Kelly replied, and Jerry just shook his head. "Where is Dad?" he asked. "In the room," Tony said, pointing proudly to the large room. "We specially repaired it for him when he was discharged. Full hospital bed, power wheelchair, everything you need. All he needs to do is ask." "Certainly." Jerry and Kelly left the tall man and went into the former closet. Jerry was shocked at how small and helpless his father looked. The strong, confident man he had looked up to all his life was a smaller shell of the man he used to be. His head lolled to the side, and he looked listlessly at his visitors as he sat in his wheelchair by the window. Jerry came over and hugged him. Frank raised his hand, which was still working, and extended it to his son for a weak handshake. "Hello, Father. I'm sorry you relapsed," Jerry said, trying to start a conversation. Frank nodded weakly. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were glued to his son's face. He tried to say something, but the words came out slurred. Jerry leaned closer to hear the man's faint words. At first, he started to pull away, nodding as if he understood. But Frank held his son's hand resolutely, repeating the words many times before he saw some recognition in Jerry's eyes. During their hesitant conversation, Tony and Agnes left the room to give them some privacy. Jerry finally realized that he was telling him that he loved him, and that he would always be his son. Jerry felt tears welling up in his eyes. He heard snoring next to him and looked at Kelly. She heard what Frank said and began to cry, covering her face with her hands. Jerry also began to choke. "You too, Dad," Jerry said to the old man, his voice trembling. "I love you, and I will always love you. I heard about problems with my mother, but for me it doesn't matter in the slightest. Nothing has changed between us, and it will never change, Dad." Frank raised one hand up. The other didn't work too well. Jerry finally realized that his father wanted another hug. He bent down again, and one of his father's arms hugged him with surprising strength. He didn't let him go right away. His mouth was next to Jerry's ear and tried to whisper something. Jerry had to listen closely to understand. Frank's words were slurred, but he was saying something that he thought was very important. Yules or moves or rules, something like that. Perhaps Frank was on edge too, because his words were so slurred that he couldn't say exactly what he wanted. Jerry felt his father starting to get upset. Therefore, he pulled away, feeling awkward that he could not understand him. They sat with Frank for a while Jerry talked about his wife and various trivia about his work and family. Frank's expression turned sour. He looked away from his son and fell silent. "I'll be back in a while, Dad." Frank didn't show that he heard him. Edith was in the large, expensively furnished kitchen, sipping coffee. There were empty plates on the table. She must have just finished eating. His mother was dressed in a colorful printed robe and had slippers on her feet. Her hair was beautifully styled, and she wore light makeup. She saw her son enter the room, and her face broke into a wide smile. She stood up as Jerry entered and hugged him tightly. "Oh, Jerry," she exclaimed, "I'm so glad to see you." "So glad you came," called Kelly. "I had to come see my dad," Jerry told her. "We met just recently, and she told me something interesting about you and Tony." "Quite an interesting story." "I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark, honey," Edith explained with slight sadness in her eyes. "But I didn't want to upset either you or your father. You can see how badly he takes it. It would be better if I didn't say anything at all." "No shit," thought Jerry. "She doesn't seem too upset, though." And he was slightly surprised at how calmly she took it. It is likely that her confession was the cause of her husband's stroke. Jerry thought she would be embarrassed by her infidelity, or at least more remorseful, considering it was her fault. "I don't know what came over me," she continued with a sigh. "I knew that it would be painful for Frank to learn about my betrayal. That's why I never told him. It was something just between me and Tony, and Agnes, of course. It never affected my marriage, and it never affected Frank over the years." "How long did it last?" Jerry asked in a neutral tone. "Oh, for a while from time to time," his mother told him casually. "Tony and I dated briefly at school before he married Agnes. Nothing serious. Then everyone met. Agnes had a couple of guys she dated from time to time, and Tony and I dated. We were all such good friends, even after we split up, and Tony started dating Agnes. We were still close, and we always went to parties as a threesome and stuff. As she told her story, her gaze moved from her son's worried face to a vague spot on the wall. It was obvious that she was remembering a very pleasant time in her life. With a sad expression on her face, she admitted, "Even after Frank and I got married, we still saw Tony and Agnes a lot. We often walked, they were at our wedding, and we were at theirs. It was such a fun time. When we had Kelly and Katie, it was one big happy family. All 6 of us, I mean. I wish this would never end." Suddenly, her expression hardened. "But when your father left me to go to that damn course, I felt so lonely. I alone took care of your sisters and did all the household chores. It was too hard. Tony helped me get through this difficult time. Without his support, I would have gone crazy. When your dad came home, I stopped seeing Tony as often. We still managed to see each other, just not as often. He was so nice about everything. He took me all over the city and introduced me to many people. He's a really wonderful person, you know." "I hope you didn't tell Dad about this," Jerry replied, frowning. Edith was startled by his exclamation and stammered, "What didn't you say? Why is the guy with whom his wife cheated on him so wonderful?" Jerry said sharply. "A great guy who he considered his friend, the friend who essentially stabbed him in the back. Not the best thing to say to an old, sick person." "You don't have to behave like that, Jerry," she frowned in response. "Of course I know that. Now it's easy to judge me." She waved her hand at him dismissively. "I'm not stupid, you know. And I didn't tell him anything like that. I just let him know the truth about what happened then. He should appreciate that I was so honest. I'm sure Dad will be very glad to hear the truth," Jerry said sharply. "He may not be happy," she replied reproachfully. "But now that he knows, he'll just have to deal with it. All this is in the past, and it is too late to worry about it now. Besides, Frank has a lot more problems than the stupid fling I had years ago. I will try to help him cope with this as best I can, but he has to help himself too." "I'm sure you can help!" Jerry spat angrily, outraged by his mother's indifferent attitude to such serious things. He deftly spun on his heel and walked away before he exploded at his stupid mother and her reckless behavior. He wanted to ask about his origins, but right now he was too upset. That conversation will have to wait for another day. Kelly was nearby and must have heard his angry retort. She came in and sat with his mom and gave him a strange look as he left the room. Jerry went to the library to think. Through the sliding glass doors, he saw Agnes on the terrace at the back of the house, sitting at a table drinking coffee. He went out and sat down at the table with her. She hugged him and poured him a cup of coffee, and they started chatting. "We never thought it was bad," Agnes told him honestly. "Edith and I were so close then. We were roommates, you know. And they did everything together." As she spoke, she gave Jerry a knowing look. "She dated Tony before me. But when I started dating him, she still joined us on dates. I think Tony still had feelings for her, so it was natural that she was there. She was such a beautiful girl, everyone loved her, and I really enjoyed her company. Tony, too. We didn't think it was a bad thing. And when Dad left for school," Jerry asked tentatively, "you and Tony just started taking her to dinner?" "Yes. Dinner, dancing, drinking, laughing." She sighed, looking thoughtfully into space, reliving the memories. "God, Jerry, how much fun we had in those days. Edith, Tony, and I were like the 3 musketeers. Your dad didn't really like going out. He was a bit of a homebody and didn't give your mother much interaction. Perhaps he worked too hard for his family." "Perhaps," Agnes agreed instantly. "I don't think he made much money in those days. But you're right, he worked a lot. When he left for school, it was normal for Tony and me to include your mom in our plans, just like we did back in college. We had so much fun." "So you agreed to Tony's affair?" "I guess so," she said dispassionately. "Tony is a handsome guy, an extraordinary personality, you know. We have always been sociable. I knew that there was a chance that he would walk behind my back. I felt that if he had to play pranks, it would be better with Edith than with someone else. She won't try to take him away from me, and we were already very close. It was just a natural combination. As I said, we didn't think it was a bad thing. She looked at Jerry and noticed his devastated look. She walked over and patted his hand. Don't be upset, honey. No harm done. I mean, no one would have gotten hurt if Edith hadn't let it slip out the other day. And don't blame your mom too much. She was alone, and Tony caught her in a weak moment. He can be very persuasive, you know? She laughed loudly. He's just adorable. Always has been and always will be. I am sure about that. Jerry felt even more disgusted than when he left his mother. Neither of them considered the affair with Tony a cause for concern. He left the elderly woman alone with her pleasant thoughts about the past days and returned to the house. His thoughts were restless until he suddenly thought of what his father had tried to say earlier. Tools! He needs his fucking tools! Jerry exclaimed excitedly, pleased that he had finally figured it out. Frank always took pride in his instruments. He had a hand-picked set of craftsman tools that he had purchased years ago and kept in the garage. At a time when he had little money, these instruments cost him a fortune. In his mind, they were always a symbol of his talent as a master mechanic. Jerry decided it was nostalgia, and he should want them around to remember his better days. He returned to his father's room and saw him looking out the window. These are tools, right, Dad? Jerry said proudly. Do you want me to bring you your old tools to the garage? The old man's bitter frown instantly disappeared. His eyes lit up and his head began to nod up and down impatiently. Fine. I know where they are. I think you want them here with you. I'll go get them, Dad. Be right back. Jerry went to his parents' house. It wasn't far. He had his key and walked into the garage, remembering the days when he sat here and watched his father work on the car, trying to make some money on the side for their poor family. It was so like him to work his ass off so he could do a few extra things for his wife and kids. He was a great father. Jerry felt a sad tear roll down his cheek and wiped it away. He just wanted his father to be free from the pain of knowing that his wife had been cheating on him with his best friend all these years. Jerry took the tools back to Uncle Tony. Tony was gone, but his mother, Kelly, and Agnes were having a heated conversation in the kitchen. They didn't even notice him enter the house as he went straight to his father's room. Even with all his shortcomings, Jerry couldn't help but notice how glad his father was to receive the tools. He waved his only working hand in the air, pointing to the corner. Jerry put the tools where he gestured and sat down next to his father. They didn't talk. They both knew he was too difficult to understand. Jerry just looked at the old man with all the love he had. He saw his father's eyes peering out from his disfigured face. Those weary eyes were brighter than before. As he stood up to leave, Frank invited him in for another hug. This time they hugged for a long time. The old man did not want to let him go. There were tears in his eyes running down his cheeks when they finally parted. You make me cry, Jerry admitted openly, feeling very emotional. He said to the old man, I'll be back tomorrow, Dad. Don't worry. I'll help you get back on your feet. I didn't know everything that happened before, but now I know. I am here for you and will help you. You'll be better than ever in no time. Can you hear me, old man? Frank nodded enthusiastically. He watched intently as his tall, muscular, dark-haired son walked out of the room. Jerry and Kelly left together. She couldn't wait to leave, as there seemed to be tension between Kelly and the two older women. She didn't tell him what was wrong, but passing by Jerry, she whispered, Mom's a fucking bitch. What? Kelly shrugged but didn't say anything. She said out loud, Let's go, Jerry. You can stay with me if you don't have a hotel room. I will be happy to see you. Of course, if you don't mind. They went to Kelly's and talked for a long time about what their family would do. Feeling tired, Jerry went to the room Kelly had prepared for him. He was undressing in the bedroom when he heard a loud explosion in the distance. Even at that distance, it was so powerful that the windows of their house shook. He ran out of the room and almost collided with Kelly. What the hell was that? She asked with a worried look. They both looked outside and saw a glow in the distance, as if there was a big fire somewhere nearby. Oh, crap! Jerry cursed as a terrible thought occurred to him. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we'd better get back to Tony. Why? I just need to check on my dad. She wanted to know why, but he didn't say. Jerry was back in the house and dressed in less than a minute. Kelly also quickly got dressed and went with Jerry, and he rushed back to the Blaylock mansion. About half an hour passed after the explosion. As they turned the last corner, they saw the flashing emergency lights of fire trucks and police cars in front of the Blaylock house. Tony's house was almost destroyed. It seemed as if the lower floor was blown up, and the rest of the house fell down, engulfed in flames. Firefighters pulled hoses, sprayed water, and tried to extinguish the flames. But it seemed useless, since most of the house was already destroyed. Oh my God, Kelly sobbed. Mom and Dad, did they die? I'm afraid so, Jerry said, hugging his sobbing sister. They told the police who they were, and the man just shook his head. I don't think anyone could survive, he said sadly. When we arrived, the house was already engulfed in flames. Nobody could get out. It looks like there was some kind of explosion, possibly a gas explosion. We will investigate and find out the reason. But today we can't do anything. I'm sorry for your loss. Jerry drove Kelly home. They sat in the living room and hardly slept. The next day, they went to the house and saw detectives picking through the smoldering ashes. Jerry identified himself and was allowed to come closer. The detectives began to question him about what they knew. Jerry didn't mention the tools he brought, but he said he believed there were 4 people in the house. Did you find anything? Jerry asked worriedly. Any traces of my parents? Yes. We found 4 bodies, the man told them. 3 of them seem to be upstairs. The house is so badly damaged, it's hard to tell. We'll have to identify them later during the autopsy. The man glanced sideways at them and said, The 4th body was funny. It's hard to say, but we think it was downstairs in the kitchen. In the kitchen? Kelly said. But Father lived in his office, right? Yes. So, this body was in the kitchen, the man continued. We know because it was near the stove, or what was left of it. What's funny about this? Jerry asked. Don't tell anyone that I told you this. The man moved closer, speaking confidentially. But since you are a member of the family, I think that the problem is in the stove, that it was a gas explosion. In fact, I'm sure of it. Is it true? Yes. The gas line was turned off. Do not know how. The connection was damaged, but survived the explosion. From experience, I can say that it was not a leak. This line was intentionally disconnected. The man leaned even closer and spoke quietly to his brother and sister. It's funny, but the body near the disconnected line was holding a pipe wrench in its hand. In hand? Kelly asked in surprise. Was it blown off by the explosion? No. A wrench was attached to his hand. Literally attached to her. The man said this with an almost funny expression on his face. He wiped the amusement from his face and continued more soberly. Obviously, he or she must have deliberately turned off the line, after which it exploded and destroyed the house. But why wire? She wrapped herself around his arm several times and held the wrench in his hand. I've never seen anything like this before. Why would anyone want to attach a wrench to their hand? I don't know, Jerry said. Maybe he wanted to ensure that he would keep him. I can't think of any other reason. Okay, the man agreed cautiously. But why do this? For what purpose? Don't know. Jerry looked at his sister's worried face. When she began to speak, he quickly interrupted her and immediately said to the man, Then, it's okay. Thanks for the info. Good luck. Here's my business card if you have any questions, the man said, politely handing him his card. I'm sorry for your parents. I don't know what happened, but now it doesn't look like an accident. Jerry and Kelly looked at each other as they walked away. Now he knew for sure that his father had finally taken revenge on his unfaithful wife and her lover, or lovers if Agnes was involved in it, and Jerry had every reason to believe that it was so. He was sure that Frank wanted to ensure that his son knew that he was the one who took revenge on them. This was no accident. As he left, hugging his sobbing sister, Jerry sadly whispered, "Message received, Dad." Jerry was sorry to lose his mother and a little sad about the loss of Uncle Tony and Aunt Agnes. After all, they had been so close to him as a child. But he could not help but respect his father, a proud soldier and a man of honor, now reduced to a feeble, almost helpless, disease-ridden man, receiving his final revenge for the worst insult a husband could face. It was so similar to his stubborn father, he wouldn't let something like that go. "God, how I love you, Dad." Jerry allowed himself to sob. "I'll miss you." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.